All of it. We're going to be getting started momentarily. I was just informed by Mr. O'Neill that they're going to give a minute or so warning to the video person. So that's what we're waiting for. Once we see him there, then we'll get started. Oh, good. You all set, sir? Yes, sir. Okay, I think we're all set. We've given the proper academic 10 minutes. We were to start promptly at 6:30. I'm Alan Counter, Director of the Harvard Foundation and Associate Professor of Neurology here. And it is my privilege this evening to introduce the speaker. We at the Harvard Foundation take great pride in our association with various offices throughout the campus. As you know, we put on programs and projects throughout the year that involve undergraduate as well as graduate and other students. And this year, the Harvard Foundation and the Kennedy School co-sponsored this evening's event. It is an opportunity for us to come together in the Harvard community to hear from a very distinguished member of this community, a graduate of the class of 1966 from Harvard College at Lowell House, and 3 years later from the Harvard Law School. He has served us now for the past 4 years as the head of the Office of Affirmative Action, but in the position of Associate Vice President and Assistant to the President. I've had the privilege of interacting with him in terms of the work we're doing with our undergraduate students, as well as other projects that I am so proud to see his office conducting, such as the Administrative Fellows Program, which has become a very well-known and distinguished program in this community. At this time, it is my privilege to present the man who heads that office. He is none other than Attorney Jamie Hoyt, the Director of the Office of Affirmative Action and Assistant to the President. Mr. Vice President Hoyt.
Thank you, Dr. Counter. He is always so kind to me because he gives me an extra year often or more with respect to when I graduated. I was actually a class of 65, but I'll take 66. It's okay. No, I really do appreciate the opportunity to provide to the Harvard community and others an update on affirmative action and racial and gender diversity here within the Harvard community. However, my first order of business is to introduce my staff who are here with me this evening. And by the way, they're here not only for moral support, but also to answer any truly tough questions, if you should have any. So let me take a moment to do that. Starting in the back is Karen Hodges-Walker, who is the director of our Administrative Fellowship Program that Dr. Counter so kindly mentioned, and also directs special projects in the office. In the next row is Penny Turner, who is my administrative assistant and sort of generally keeps me on my toes, hopefully. Oh, and I almost missed it back there, is many of you know Jackie Benson-Jones, who for a long time was in the Human Resources Office here at Harvard and is brought her expertise to our office to deal with a variety of workplace environment kinds of issues, that is to say, concerns of women and people of color here within the Harvard community, particularly on the staff side. Then coming down and toward the middle here is Mela Materano, who is our Director of Equal Employment Opportunity and Compliance, and also the principal author of our annual Affirmative Action Plan. So she, in particular, will be here to help with some specific data questions if you may have them. And then Nancy Cohen, who is the newest member of our office, who is in particular working with Karen Hodges-Walker on the Administrative Fellowship Program, as well as the Case Intern Program, but also generally provides tremendous support and help and sort of a jack of all trades within the office, so we appreciate that. So now that I have told you the sort of the real actors in the office, let me comment, if I can, briefly about the political and social context within which Harvard is pursuing its programs. And I offer these contextual comments with a good deal of trepidation, I might tell you, because obviously I do not pretend to be able to match Jesse Jackson, whom I had the privilege to hear when he spoke at the Institute of Politics a few weeks ago. And he spoke with great passion and eloquence, and clearly it's not my objective to put myself up against his wonderful and inspiring comments with respect to the need for affirmative action. But nevertheless, I think it might be useful, before we talk about some of the issues here at Harvard, to try to put them into some context. I might just say that it's clear to me, and I'll repeat actually a thought that Reverend Jackson had, it's clear to me that there is no data that suggests that the privileged position of white males in industry, government, or the academy is being the least threatened by affirmative action. I put that out because so much that we hear these days suggests that somehow or another the affirmative action programs and efforts to diversify our institutions are only being done at the cost of providing opportunity to white males. I think that's not the case, quite clearly. And in that regard, I might say that many observers have recently noted that, quite to the contrary, the fact of the matter is that we don't have a situation where women and minorities are getting, quote, all the good jobs to the detriment of white males. Occupancy of privileged positions in our society remains almost the exclusive domain of white males. For example, 97% of senior managers of Fortune 1000 companies are white males, and well over 75% of tenured professors in institutions of higher education in this country are white males. A 1992 study quoted in the report of the Federal Glass Ceiling Commission revealed that, quote, prejudice against minorities and white women continues to be the single most important barrier to their advancement into the executive ranks. The Glass Ceiling report goes on to include a very troubling set of findings. For example, African American men and women comprise less than 2.5% of total employment in top jobs in the private sector. African American men with professional degrees earn only 79% of the amount of their white male counterparts. And African American women with professional degrees earn only 60% of what white males earn. In 1994, only 2 women were CEOs of Fortune 1000 companies. More encouraging is the statistic that between 1982 and 1992, the percentage of women who held the title of executive vice president increased from 4% to 9%, while the percentage that held the title of senior vice president increased from 13% to 23%. However, over the same period, the percentage of African Americans who held the title of vice president or above, and that's just vice president or above, remained below 2.5%, having increased from 1% to 2.3%. Comparable figures for Hispanic managers were 1.3% to 2% over that period, and for Asian Americans, 0.4% to 1.8%. We turn to higher education. The picture is equally difficult. A review of the data for doctoral degrees awarded is as follows. In 1991, only 3% of doctorates went to African Americans. Only 2.1% went to Hispanics, 3.4% to Asian Americans, and only 0.3% to Native Americans. A similar review of doctorates awarded by gender shows that 36.2% of all doctorates awarded in 1991 were granted to women. Thus, the data relating to attainment of senior positions or positions of privilege is certainly not encouraging and shouldn't be in the least threatening to white males, frankly. Similarly, Assistant Attorney General Deval Patrick recently provided powerful insight into the persistent problem of racial and gender discrimination in our society when he testified to Congress in connection with the current congressional review of affirmative action. As Attorney Patrick stated, discrimination on the basis of race, ethnicity, and gender persists throughout the United States. He emphasized that he was not confining his comments to the effects of past discrimination either, but that current, real-life examples of such discrimination are apparent. Thus, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission received over 91,000 complaints of discrimination in employment alone last year. The Assistant Attorney General went on to comment on just a few of the documented examples of discrimination in all walks of American life that reach his desk in the Civil Rights Division. He also noted the continuing disparity existing between whites and minorities and males and females with respect to various indicators of successful participation in American life. He noted that the unemployment rate of African Americans was more than twice that of whites in 1993, while the median income of African Americans was barely one-half that of whites. Furthermore, in 1992, over 50% of African American children under 6 and 44% of Hispanic children in that age group lived under the poverty level, while only 14.4% of white children did so. The overall poverty rates were 33.3% for African Americans and 29.3% for Hispanics, compared to 11.6% for whites. Finally, Mr. Patrick noted that unequal access to education plays an important role in creating and perpetuating these disparities. In this regard, he observed that in 1993, less than 3% of college graduates were unemployed, happily, but whereas 22.6% of all whites had college degrees, only 12.2% of African Americans and 9% of Hispanics did. This fact, of course, is particularly distressing since we know that as the nature of our economy evolves in complexity, educational credentials will become even more crucial in determining whether individuals can rise into middle class or will in fact be permanently consigned to poverty-level jobs or unemployment. So the unfortunate fact is that in every aspect of contemporary American life, we can see the pernicious, lingering effects of past racial and gender discrimination. Yet, it's also true that little progress toward equal participation that we have seen has been enormously helped by affirmative efforts to diversify corporate payrolls as well as university administrations, faculty, and student bodies. I suspect that those of us who observe the Harvard community of 1980, for example, and consider its diversity profile then versus now, can understand how far we have come through a commitment to achieving a racially and gender diverse university community. Indeed, I would argue that at Harvard, our greatest accomplishments in terms of achieving diversity while preserving, indeed enhancing excellence, have been in those activities where administrators truly engaged in outreach, recruitment, and nurturing. In other words, in admissions, student services, and campus life. And as an aside, I might just mention that the Harvard Foundation has been an important part of those particular achievements. Now, at Harvard, we have made progress over the past several years toward our goal of building a diverse community. Since 1969, Harvard has affirmed and reaffirmed annually a university-wide commitment to the policy and practice of affirmative action and equal opportunity in the Harvard community. I wanted to say that loud and clear, again, in the context of the debate and the discussion that's going on in the larger community. People ask me from time to time whether, because of the kind of commentary and discussion that we're hearing in that larger community, has Harvard somehow backed away from its commitment to diversity. Clearly, that's not the case, and indeed, we reaffirmed it formally through the corporation again this year. In fact, in reaffirming the goals of equal employment opportunity and affirmative action, the Harvard Corporation has stated, quote, "Diversity within the university community advances the academic purposes of the university, and an affirmative action policy is essential to achieving such diversity." I would submit that the university's commitment to the attainment of racial, cultural, gender, and intellectual diversity in all sectors of its community has particular importance at a time when U.S. society is becoming increasingly heterogeneous, as well as increasingly interconnected with the rest of the world. Now, given Harvard's long-standing role in educating leaders in different spheres of society, seems to me it's a matter of particular importance that we strive to reflect the diversity of our pluralistic society, and do so in ways that reinforce and enhance excellence in all sectors throughout the university. But you really want to know, how has Harvard done lately? The answer is that we have made modest progress toward our overall objective, with notable areas of accomplishment, but frankly, far too many weak spots. So with this background in mind, I'd like briefly to review some of the highlights of our 1995 Affirmative Action Plan. Looking at university-wide data, we note that our faculty census was as follows. With respect to tenured women university-wide, there were 105 total, or 9.3% of tenured faculty university-wide. With respect to minorities, and broken down by racial or ethnic group, in the tenured category, we had some 29 African-American tenured faculty members university-wide, representing 3% of the total. With respect to Asian Americans, we had 43 tenured faculty university-wide, representing 4%. And with respect to Hispanics, comparable numbers are 15 or 1%. Excuse me. Looking at the latter faculty, and I might just say as an aside, in the Harvard context, latter is a difficult concept because, particularly in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, we really have no formal ladder system. But nevertheless, using ladder as a concept, namely associate professors and assistant professors, university-wide, With respect to women, there are a total of 585, or 20.8%. And with respect to African Americans, a total of 38, or 1%. Asian Americans, a total of 206, or 7%. Hispanics, a total of 49, or 2%. On the other hand, progress with respect to the employment of women and minorities in the non-faculty managerial and professional positions is also apparent, although mixed. Thus, I can tell you that university-wide, 60% of the managerial and professional positions are held by women, while a total of 451, or 11%, of such positions are held by people of color. Now, as most of you know, the separate 9 faculties at Harvard each has its own appointments process, and each has its own approach toward attracting women and minorities. This situation makes it quite difficult, frankly, to generalize about problems and barriers to more rapid progress. However, there are significant challenges that all of the faculty share. I'd like to spend a few minutes mentioning a few of them, and then I think we can come back to looking at individual schools, and it may make sense after that to really move into discussion mode so that we can focus on the kinds of questions or concerns that you as individuals have. But anyway, taking a look at some of the broader problems and opportunities that cut across faculties, I might mention that at the senior tenured level, I think the first problem that we have involves the very limited number of appointments that are made at this level at Harvard in any given year. Probably there are less than 50 university-wide tenure appointments in a given year, and generally fewer than 20 in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. So the opportunity for making appointments at the tenure level is necessarily circumscribed or limited just because of the few number of openings. The so-called ad hoc process at this level complicates matters further. That process, by the way, is one which sends recommendations for such appointments from the departments through the deans to the president's office, who in turn is required under existing Harvard procedure to seek commentary from throughout the country on whether or not a proposed appointment presumably reflects the very best available person in that field at that time, not just nationally, but internationally. Also, the lack of any real tenure track, as I mentioned, in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, means, among other things, that opportunities to provide support and/or close monitoring in a career pathing sense really are quite limited, if not non-existent. Nevertheless, having identified such challenges to achieving faculty diversity, I think the various schools have undertaken important approaches to trying to increase diversity with respect to both women and minorities. Throughout the university, searches for both tenured and non-tenured professors involved focused efforts to identify and consider leading women and minority candidates. The new Outreach Fund, which operates out of the Office of the President, was created with the aim of helping individual schools and departments overcome financial obstacles to the appointment of excellent women and minority professors, permanent appointments, by the way, in fields where they have been historically represented. You may recall that that fund works in such a way as to provide 1/2 FTE to be matched by the school in question for a senior level appointment of a woman or underrepresented minority to a permanent senior faculty position. If the school can demonstrate that through the normal processes, that's to say budgetary processes, they could not be expected to make that appointment on their own. So it's not meant to be a substitute for the responsibility that each dean and department has for undertaking its own search and commitment to making appointments through the normal processes. The fund has already been of assistance in several faculty searches and will continue to do so, and in fact, appointments have been made with the assistance of the fund. Also, several faculties have in recent years designated individual professors, deans, or committees to direct intensified efforts aimed at enhancing the recruitment and retention of women and minority faculty. That's an important point. I mean, it may seem simple, but the fact of the matter is having a single point person identified can be particularly valuable with respect to focusing efforts and, to some degree at least, helping to put into place some degree of accountability for the process. Also, visiting professorships and lectureships have been used by several faculties to bring leading women and minority scholars to campus and explore the possibility of future Harvard appointments. Similarly, joint appointments between departments or schools have been used to engage several outstanding women and minority scholars with expertise in more than a single academic field. Outstanding examples are Judge Higginbottom here at the Kennedy School and the law school, Professor Evelyn Brooks Higginbottom at Faculty of Arts and Sciences and the Divinity School, and there have been others. So that the technique of seeking to make appointments to joint appointments to various departments enhances the opportunity for recruitment very often. I might also say that as an aside, something that people don't necessarily think about is the fact that by pursuing that technique with its benefits, it also imposes extra burdens on the particular individual being appointed. Because if you think about it, they will always be sought out by committees in each of their departments, not to mention their schools, to serve in various administrative capacities, et cetera, so that as Professor Higginbottom, Evelyn Higginbottom noted to me, she sort of just doubled up in all of her administrative requirements and responsibilities, which are over and above her scholarly pursuits. And that's not a small matter for a senior faculty member. In any case, in recent years, these strategies have helped to the point that within the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, the rate at which women have been hired into tenured faculty positions over the past few years has been approximately 25%. And that compares favorably with the overall percentage of tenured women in faculties across the country in fields in which Harvard hires. Now that's in fairness, hopefully a careful statement, because I should be forthright in saying that while that's the case, we still lag behind in overall percentage terms other institutions throughout the country. That is to say, the actual percentage of tenured women in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences overall remains low. And that's particularly the case in certain departments, particularly in the social sciences and the natural sciences. There's been the most progress in the humanities. With respect to faculty of color, the challenges are perhaps even greater, especially since the production of PhDs, unfortunately, remains quite low in each of the racial and ethnic categories that we're concerned about. And the problem of overall production is exacerbated by the fact that even fewer doctorates are awarded to minorities in the fields in which Harvard recruits. For example, most doctorates awarded to African Americans are either in education or clinical psychology, which are not generally areas which Harvard recruits for faculty. So there are indeed problems and barriers to making progress with respect to continued movement on faculty diversity. I just mentioned a few of the issues, and there are many more, and perhaps in our discussion period we can explore them in a little bit more detail. But moving for a minute over to the administrative side of things, I'd like to make a few comments about our current situation. First, I think you'll all agree, who know anything about Harvard, that our culture is characterized by a lack of formal career development systems. And indeed, I believe that the traditional lack of attention to career development opportunities for administrative staff at Harvard results in reliance on informal systems and contacts for advancement. Such reliance on informal systems and contacts tends to work to the detriment of people of color and women. We know from studies within industry that informal networks are less helpful to these groups. At Harvard, it's my impression that this factor has caused very mixed results. On the one hand, I am convinced that one of the reasons that women have done so well in administrative staff areas at Harvard is that early on, some extremely competent women rose to the top despite difficult odds and provided both role models and informal network advice, as well as mentoring to other women throughout the university. That's been useful and that's been helpful. Unfortunately, no such experience can be found here relative to people of color. Indeed, I suspect that the existence of high-profile women executives at Harvard suggests to other women that real opportunity exists here for them. At the same time, I would imagine that the almost total absence of senior administrators of color sends the opposite message. I think that's one of our major challenges. But instead of sort of continuing on with this statistical recitation, I think what I'd like to do at this point is to open it up for some general discussion, and perhaps we can get into individual topics, areas of data that are of particular interest to the audience. So with that, could I move to questions? Sir.
Tell me whether affirmative action applies to student employees, and if so, are there numbers included in the calculations of what affirmative action is, and if not, why they are not?
Well, I don't, with the numbers question, I don't believe that students are included in our numbers, are they? I'm looking to Mela to give for some help. No, I didn't think so. Now, on the, the issue of whether affirmative action applies, let me be clear about how I believe affirmative action tends to work in the Harvard context, which on the one hand, again, should give comfort for those people who somehow feel that there are groups, well, that white males are being disadvantaged in some sense, while on the other hand, suggest that maybe some notions of affirmative action are not terribly well ensconced here at the university. And what I mean by all that is that I am not aware of any instances where on the administrative side, we've gone beyond enlarging the pool for recruitment purposes and then reaching out, hopefully, to women and minorities aggressively who have the same, if not higher, qualifications than their white male counterparts. So what I'm saying is that the employment process where affirmative action comes into play generally here at Harvard is trying to identify and increase the pool available to be recruited from. With respect to students, Harvard has a wealth of very competent and accomplished and maybe in some instances relatively lower wage students available to be in the pool, and that suggests to me that it's more than likely that offices around the university are going to be interested in reaching out to students and including them. So I think there's plenty of opportunity for students. If you're saying, is there a willingness on the part of departments to reach out and include students in the pool? We don't count, as I say, for affirmative action statistic purposes, numbers of women and minority students in our totals.
May I ask you, if you're going to ask a question, please press the white button in the center of your desk and speak to the microphone. That way it's much clearer. Are there other questions? Yes, ma'am. The white button's right on the side. See on the side there? And you're speaking to the microphone. Any of these will open this right there. Mr. O'Neill, will you show her, please?
Extremely high tech in here. You have to hold it, I think, when you're speaking.
Maybe women are not as good in dealing with microphones.
Oh.
I was wondering, I would like to hear you talk also about the qualitative aspect of the issue of trying to understand why the gap may continue to exist in terms of promoting minority or women, either from in the scale before tenure or to the kinds of tenure position, and what we could do about it. What I'm alluded to is the fact something we among women faculty, whether white or African American or minority in general, we have a sense that one of the things that is at stake is that we tend to spend on average more time with students than our male counterpart. We may, of course, these are averages. We may tend to spend more time in teaching than research, and therefore this is the kind of thing that may hinder our promotion. Is there a discussion about the kind of criteria that are applied to promotion and what that can do for affirmative action at Harvard in your offices?
There have been a couple of important studies and analyses, particularly in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, that have sought to address some of the very issues that you're identifying as they relate to women. Professor Barbara Groves issued a report, who is a senior professor in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, chaired a committee that put together a report, I believe in 1991, that noted that, in fact, there is some evidence to support the comments that you made. That is to say that it would seem that among women there's been more of a tendency to focus on other parts of the academic experience than perhaps the amount of time that goes into research, and there's for whatever set of reasons, some I suppose, whether counseling involves greater tendency for nurturing, I don't know. That's an argument that's been made. But in any case, the issues and the problems, I think, have been highlighted and then reinforced to some degree with a report that Professor Cynthia Friend came out with in '94 that re-emphasized some of those same issues. Now, I think the Faculty of Arts and Sciences have been trying to address some of the particular problems that might affect women faculty a little bit more than they affect male faculties, having to do with childcare, for example, and the availability of programs to support parental leave. Now, that's available to both women and men, but participation has been greater amongst women faculty. So I think there have been some efforts to begin to address it. On the question of whether or not thought is being given to changing or rethinking the criteria used for appointments, it's my impression that that's not likely to happen. From all that I've heard, there's my personal view is that, but I'm not on the academic side, but my personal view is that, you know, perhaps there's a need to be more open to that possibility. But everything that I hear from senior faculty and those who develop those policies suggests that it's not likely that anytime soon there'll be a different way of looking at, if you will, the set of criteria that ought to be used for making those decisions. On the promotion question, just one last point, what I tried to say earlier is that, again, at least in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, you really don't, I mean, from time to time, a junior faculty member is promoted to senior status, but that's really the exception rather than the rule. Because of this ad hoc process and otherwise, the typical situation is where a faculty member spends some time here at Harvard at a junior level, goes outside the university, accepting a senior appointment someplace else, makes a name for his or herself in that context, and then maybe gets considered for a senior appointment here at Harvard. That's different, I think, at some of the professional schools where, in fact, there is a ladder, a very clearly identified ladder as you come in as a junior faculty member and get eventually promoted to a senior faculty status, but it's unusual in arts and sciences.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I mean, let me ask a real basic question.
Mm-hmm.
What's this? How do you, I mean, how's Harvard define affirmative action? I mean, what, you know, what is sort of included in that? Is it everything from how it hires to, you know, programs like, I believe the program that I was reading about here, from January '91 to establish more generous policies with sort of parental teaching relief and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how do you define it? And I also wanted to ask you about I like very much what you said about the relationship between affirmative action and the sort of pieces and small pieces of progress that we've seen at Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, have you been able to sort of quantify that relationship to show that it's actually affirmative action, as you defined it, that is getting what little progress we're getting?
Well, let me just, starting with the first part of it, what I was trying to suggest is that I think the way affirmative action, strictly speaking, if you will, works here at Harvard is that there's more focused attention to reaching out and identifying a broader pool for recruitment purposes, whether we're talking about on the faculty side or on the staff side. And I don't think that would have happened, let me just hasten to add, without real pressure and a push for Harvard to engage in, quote, affirmative action. Now, other kinds of programs, I think, make it more likely, if you will, that those affirmative efforts might be successful, such as the parental leave program and others, so that once people get here, there's a greater opportunity that the environment offers the context for a successful experience. But I really do want to emphasize that a couple of things, which maybe are self-apparent, or are apparent, but I think it's worth emphasizing. Number one, that we're always talking about, in the Harvard context, people operating at the very highest levels of their respective fields, whether we're talking about faculty or staff, And then number two, I'm not aware of any decisions that get reached whereby someone other than the most qualified individual gets selected for the position. So the trick here is to make sure the pool includes, amongst those qualified individuals, women and people of color. And that's a battle sometimes, but I think that's the approach.
I'm sorry if I can follow up. I mean, doesn't, I mean, the progress you're talking about in terms of numbers isn't particularly encouraging. And those numbers are, a lot of them, it's nice to hear about the high percentage of women in professional managerial positions. I mean, it's not particularly encouraging. I mean, if we're going to do any better than that, aren't we going to either have to have sort of, big structural changes in the way we do things like tenure, to actually have a real tenure track, or are we going to have to start thinking about quotas, real hard and fast rules to get any greater progress than what we've had?
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, did you have?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't think we need to move to quotas. Let me just say that word that gets everybody on edge. I don't think it's necessary. It certainly hasn't been the case in the past. I don't think it's necessary in the future. I personally, and again, I'm not a part of the faculty, so can't influence this very much, but I personally would like to see a little less rigidity in the way perhaps the tenure process is thought about. But, I'm not, as I try to say to the young woman, I am not necessarily all that hopeful that that's likely to happen anytime soon. In fact, I may even ask for some help from a real faculty member here. I don't know if you see any movement in that direction, but I don't.
If I may.
Please, yeah, no, I'd appreciate your comment.
You turn to me. I just wonder, if you look at our faculty, for example, of arts and sciences, I'm thinking about a statement made by Chancellor Cheng-Lin Tian when he was here from Berkeley, saying that he's really set up a program, and his philosophy is that excellence through diversity is what he described. And when you look at our departments, let's say the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, other than Black Studies, African American Studies, what do you see as the progress we're making with regard to, let's take categories, let's say African Americans, first of all, Hispanics of both Puerto Rican and Chicano backgrounds. I mean, given the fact that we know, for example, there's a significant core, well-trained in most of these disciplines in arts and sciences, Latinos, for example, in the California area. And what efforts do you see being made by the faculty to reach out to that community, let's say?
Well, I think that let me first say that, in all honesty, I'm not optimistic for quick changes in the profile in most of those areas that you're talking about, Dr. Counter. Unfortunately, I don't see that. And that's why I would say again, I do think that until we broaden the way we think about both the tenuring process and the kind of excellence that people bring to our community, I think it's going to be particularly difficult to make real progress. Now, having said that, I do think that some things are being done. I think, as you know, there are many people within the university community, including yourself, who have been pushing very hard for a more aggressive look at opportunities through ethnic studies programs, for example, to bring senior, highly regarded faculty from all over the country here. That is to say, if there are departments and research areas that some extremely impressive individuals have the opportunity to come and spend some time within here at Harvard, I think we could make progress more quickly. Unfortunately, the ethnic studies area has not moved as quickly as we want, but there are a number of people, again, including you, Dr. Counter, I know, who are working hard to see if we can't move forward with ethnic studies, for example. But until we are willing to, at least on the faculty side, do something in areas like that, where there, for a variety of reasons, I'm not saying all of them are bad reasons, that there's sort of traditional resistance to the establishment of some of these fields. But until we move past that, I think it's going to be difficult to see dramatic progress. I think what's even, perhaps more troubling is the situation with respect to more junior faculty and faculty in the so-called ladder, because Harvard has done a reasonably good job, I think, in increasing the numbers of people of color in their PhD programs, which is a sort of a first step in the process. And I mentioned already that there is a problem with it in terms of PhD production overall, but nevertheless, it seems to me that our initial base might be those excellent individuals that come through our own PhD programs, and then if we worked very closely with them and maintained contact, whether they stayed here at Harvard or went someplace else, and provided maybe some informal nurturing, not only while they're here at Harvard, but maybe elsewhere, I think there's a greater likelihood that, in a quicker period of time, we'd be able to recognize them for the excellence that they may indeed have, and therefore reach out to them for more permanent faculty positions. So, I would like to see things like that happening. I think, unfortunately, they're not happening as quickly as they might, but I'm more or less an optimist, so I would see possibilities in the future. Yes.
I guess my question is referring to, formal mechanisms that exist in the system. As you've mentioned, there have been a lot of studies and reports that have come out with very compelling evidence that cites the need for and the barriers for hiring minority and women faculty. And I'm wondering, what is the formal mechanism that when these reports come out, like the Gross Report or the Verber Report, who is receiving the report? Who has mandate to act on the report? How do the recommendations that are in these reports get pushed forward, and whose responsibility to oversee that process? Who is that person? And I guess in December we had a panel with 5 senior faculty women citing specific changes about the tenure process that they felt were on the whole rather reasonable, and that a lot of people supported these ideas in changing the tenure process itself. And I wonder, what is the mechanism for those kinds of systematic changes in the actual tenure process that exists now?
Well, the mechanism would, would have to be within the framework of the individual faculties involved, individual schools involved in the faculty governance structure in those schools. So within the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, it's the faculty as a whole and the committees that have been established to deal with issues such as, tenure appointments that might introduce the possibilities for change. But it's even more difficult than that, because in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, things are controlled pretty comprehensively at the departmental level. That's the culture here at Harvard. I don't see that culture changing terribly quickly. One way to short-circuit a lot would be if there were a willingness to think about broad-scale, systemic changes in the way we do things, including tenuring. And as I say, I think that can only come from the faculty up, because our culture doesn't allow for very much to come from I don't know where down. And it's not even appropriate to say down, because there's no precedent for that. But it really would have to bubble up from the faculty, I would say.
I guess a lot of the problems that were brought up during that panel discussion did have to do past the departmental level in some respect, in terms of the ad hoc committee, and also the accountability that the president has to the reasons or the reasons why he might reject decisions that were unanimously approved by the departments but do not pass at the ad hoc level. And I'm wondering, where would the process change, or whose responsibility is that once it's past the departmental level?
Well, first, after it goes past the departmental level, it goes to the dean, and then on to the, as you say, to the president for the ad hoc process, and that is indeed something that, that he manages, and that's what I don't know, and I honestly don't know, is to what extent that ad hoc process is a function of some formal vote or otherwise of the corporation, or to what extent it's been tradition around here, because a lot of things are. Thank you, Dr. Conley. A lot of things are, in fact, tradition. I suspect that the ad hoc process is more deeply ingrained. I mean, it's so deeply ingrained, I would suspect that there's more to it than tradition, but I don't really, short answer is I don't really know the answer to your question. As far as that's concerned, I would say, though, that very few decisions actually fall out of the ad hoc process. That is to say, where there's unanimity or something close to unanimity on the part of departments and the dean in terms of a recommendation to the president, it's quite rare, is my understanding, historically and certainly contemporaneously, for the president to not go along with that, not to forward it on to the appointments committee. Now, there have been some instances in the certainly in the last year where that's occurred, and I'm not in a position to speak to those individual instances, but I think that's it's an unusual occurrence. I think where the ad hoc process becomes more of really is the problem is just the concept of it and what it kind of requires in the preparation for the appointment and the way that it operates, I think, against internal promotions. That's not to say that it can never have an internal promotion, but the way it operates, it tends to be biased against internal promotions, as I was trying to indicate. And I think that's a problem, and it's a problem in terms of being able to monitor what's going on. It's a lot easier I think, to monitor what's going on in terms of potential internal promotions than it is perhaps if you're dealing with a potential appointment from University of California or something on to here. Yes?
Yeah. You mentioned administratively that there was a lack of career development. Mm-hmm. Is there something that would prohibit, say, the Harvard Outreach Program from creating some bridge positions? Could they fund some bridge positions?
Well, the outreach fund that I mentioned is quite limited, both in concept and construct, and limited to faculty appointments, first of all, and not only just to faculty appointments, but to senior faculty appointments, that is to say, tenured faculty appointments. So, I mean, the fund as constituted, I think, would not be the vehicle for the kind of thing I sense you're talking about. Now, whether or not there are other vehicles out there that might be tried is an interesting question. I mean, part of the problem with the lack of formal career development, though, is just it's partly the culture around here and the decentralized nature of the institution. So that it's my sense that there was, I wasn't here then, but it's my sense that there was more attention to career development some years ago when there was a strong and significant central human resources office. Now there's a very small human resources office with the human resource function scattered throughout the various schools, and there's relatively more or less attention paid to the issue of career development depending upon the interest of the particular school and styles and so forth. There does seem to be an overall feeling that somehow or another it's almost this kind of I would compare it to a macho notion or something of, you being thrown into the water and sinking or swimming somehow, really identifies the truly good people or something. My own view is that, again, some more formal career development process would be helpful, but it hasn't been the culture here, and it's very hard to introduce anything into Harvard that sort of runs against tradition. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't stop, because obviously in the affirmative action sense, almost nothing that we want to do is part of tradition, so you sort of have to be willing to challenge it, but it is, I think, a real problem. And there's no mechanism, I think, right now that exists that we can easily attach it to. Yes, Tamara.
Yes, I have a question somewhat along the same lines of what you were talking about. This is working. With looking for mechanisms or dealing with the traditional nature in which the culture stays or becomes entrenched in that. I'm wondering how, or if studies have been done or attention has been paid to how Harvard, let's say the college, compares to other Ivy League institutions or perhaps some Ivy top 25
Mm-hmm.
in the composition of minority women faculty,
Mhm.
and if perhaps even in the Ivy League, if there's any disparity between our efforts, or not even our efforts, but our actual composition
Yeah.
of the faculty, and if perhaps there might be some solutions to be found in the ways that other schools are doing it, if we are perhaps justifying the way in which things are done, or justifying the culture in that, well, we are the #1 school for the last, whatever. And we have
Sure.
a reputation to uphold.
Mhm.
Perhaps we could look to other schools that we consider to be on par with us to look at their process of selection. Why is it that they could perhaps find the schools that they could be selecting from a pool, which
Mhm.
we then select from ourselves.
Mhm.
Go to Duke and say we want
Mhm.
Gates and bring him here.
Mhm. Mhm.
How is it that they found him
Mhm.
in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm wondering where it all comes from.
Yeah, sure. Well, that's a tricky and difficult question, I think. Certainly, and without being facetious, I think so much of Harvard likes to think of itself as being, really truly unique. So there's sort of no institution out there that is quite like it. The argument would go from, some quarters within the university. But clearly there are, major research institutions, some of which are in the Ivy League and some perhaps not, that in broad terms we would be roughly comparable to, it seems to me, under any fair analysis. And indeed, our office actually does a study each year of faculty diversity at 15 schools? 15? Yeah. Yeah. I think that the picture in the last few years for Harvard has been, we certainly haven't been at the most outstanding performer from a diversity standpoint, but we haven't been the worst either. And then if some would argue if you control for differences such as a school like Columbia, you have a number of disciplines that we don't traditionally have here at Harvard. They happen to be including a teacher's college and others that tend to be more people of color and perhaps even more women in those particular disciplines, which some would argue gives on this, with respect to this factor, an advantage to Columbia. But anyway, I think the short answer to your question is that we're sort of, we're certainly not outperforming most of those schools. On the other hand, we're not the worst performer amongst them. And I think that the information tells me, at least, that we could be doing more than, we ought to be able to perform a bit better than we are.
I guess I'm just wondering if there are other schools that maybe you all have looked at as models for having come, a certain way that maybe could be suggested to people that, look, this is in our professional opinion, as a affirmative action office, this is what we've seen that has happened in this situation. This is kind of work. I don't know.
The problem really is, and again, this sounds nitpicky, and hopefully not defensive, but I think the problem tends to be that most of those schools that I might, at first blush, suggest could be an interesting model for us to look at, it ends up that there are important differences in their mix of disciplines, as I say, that they may have at the school, and approaches to it. Some schools, for example, tenure associate professors where we don't here at Harvard, and that produces a, sort of a different picture. So it's a little bit more complicated than that. Having said that, I remain convinced that there are things to be learned from some other institutions individually. I don't know that there's any single model, but taking a look at the whole list, there are some things going on at one school that might be helpful for us to, if not emulate, at least think about as, trying, and similarly other things at another school, et cetera. I don't think there's any one single model, though, and none of them really are outstanding. And in terms of the 15 schools that I'm talking about, none of them have a exceptionally impressive record on diversity. Yes.
It seems to me that the tabulations in your affirmative action plan list every conceivable category except non-minority males. Am I right? And if I am,
Well, they're not broken out, if that's what you mean, yeah.
well, I'm curious. Wouldn't that be of interest? I mean, it's very hard to tell from the numbers because, for example, under degree students, it says does not include 2,676 foreign students. I mean, it's very hard to tell if there are any non-minority males in this whole thing. I just wondered why you don't specifically mention non-minority males, since you have about 15 other categories anyway.
Yeah, the categories, by the way, I mean, the short answer to your question, maybe it's not a good answer, but the short answer is that our plan reflects what the Department of Labor's reporting format and criteria is, okay?
You mean they do not specify that you have any non-minority males?
Well, there are non-minority, I mean, you can derive from the total, if you,
I tried to. I can't figure out how you can do it when you have 2,676 foreign students who are not in there and 3,045 students whose ethnicity is unknown or other out of a total of...
This is in the category of a tough question that I'm going to give to Mela. What is the, can you...
Let me see if we're looking at the same page. Are you looking at the summary affirmative?
I'm looking at page 20 and page 3, I believe. One is degree candidate students and one is the university totals. And in both of them, they have all kinds of categories, but not non-minority males.
There is no question that there's not separated out a category called non-minority male. I mean, I agree with that.
Could
Look
it
at
be
the
done?
page 3. Yeah, it could be done. On page 3, that one is easier because if you took the all column and you subtracted out the women and then you subtracted out the 4 groups of minority males, you would get the total white males.
Sure.
Okay, but you know what? I don't want to take up the whole group in too much detail with this.
People are, people are either.
There are other minorities that aren't mentioned here.
Yeah, Mela, perhaps you could help him try to get at that a little bit more deeply afterwards, because I think we'll.
I want to announce that we do have more copies of these. If anyone's interested, I'll put them next to Nancy.
And we'll do our best to help you find the non-minority males if in there. Yes.
I guess that sort of brings up the other question that I have in terms of any specific and directed plans that you have in terms of minority women, because we often talk about the issue of women and minorities, and we usually think about white women and male minorities, but where women minorities fall is sometimes in the middle and nobody catches them. And I wonder, in the whole process of, are they double counted? Are they, I mean, they seem to be this great resource where you can double count them for the women category and the male category, I mean the minority category, and have, increased diversity with one person. And I'm just wondering, are there any specific plans that your office or that exist now?
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't say that there's any particular initiative or program or anything of that sort that is aimed specifically at minority women or issues that might be unique or of particular interest. Now, what we do is to support participation from people within the university community in a variety of, there have been, in recent years, I think, an increasing number of workshops and otherwise that try to address the issues that might be, if not unique to minority women, but of particular interest to minority women. And if you want to be in touch with the office afterwards, we can try to help make sure that you're aware of those things which tend to take place outside the university. But in terms of a program that we have ourselves, no, we don't. But if you have some ideas, I'd be glad to, talk about them. Other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Let me just say in closing that I think Mr. Hoyt will stay around for a few minutes if some of you would like to chat with him, and we thank all of you for coming out this evening. You're certainly welcome to attend all of the activities and events that the Foundation opens to the community, so we invite you to join us for other projects that the Foundation sponsors, and almost every one of those projects will be announced in the Harvard Gazette. Thank you very much.
Thanks again.
Thank you so much. You were very kind. Appreciate it. Yeah, you taught us a lot about it.
We never seem to know enough.
I know, it's very fancy.
But thanks
Really
again.
impressive. How you doing? Nice system. Having somebody. No, that's right. We like to do that a lot more with science and.
Yeah, well, it seems like